The first question that I have, and I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, in this economic emergency, we find our nation and its citizens in such terrible straits, and people are curious. What are you saying? Are you changing your strategy? Are you changing your advice to people?
Well, the good news about the stuff that we teach is it's common sense, and so it works when times are good, and it works when times aren't so good. You know, lots of folks out there are struggling. There's lots of folks who aren't struggling. There's lots of people doing very, very well. Certainly Michigan has had its moments, and she's struggling in a lot of ways. But there's a lot of people, even though you may know some people that are hurting, there's a lot of people around here who still have a job and are still doing very well. And so, but it works either way. If times are bad, it's good to have an emergency fund, because you may have an emergency. If times are good, it's good to have an emergency fund, because you may have an emergency.
Let me ask you this. It's my second question, and it's a second question for a viewer, too. Mitch was wondering this, and so many back at the station as well. You know you're in Michigan, and you know how dependent that this state is upon the auto industry, all of the auto suppliers, and all the trickle-down companies that are affected by the manufacturing of a car. You have often said, buy a beater, drive it till you're out of debt. Don't ever buy a used car unless, or don't ever buy a new car unless you're worth $1 million. What are you thinking about this economy, how dependent not only Michigan but this nation is on the auto industry, and what that would do to the automakers?
Well, obviously everyone's not going to follow Dave Ramsey's advice. We're not under any illusion about that. But what families are bent on doing, what a family has to do is a family has to look at what's good for their family. It's not my patriotic duty to support Detroit. It's my patriotic duty to take care of my children and make sure they get to go to college. And if I'm paying freaking new car payments all the time, I can't send my kids to college. The typical middle-class American family paying a $478 car payment cannot prosper in that situation. Now, does that mean that no one ever buys a new car? No. And Detroit's problems are far beyond whether somebody buys a new car or not based on the stuff that we teach. Based on waiting to have $1 million. Their problems were they were selling a whole bunch of cars to people who really couldn't afford them and have gotten themselves and those people in a mess.
People want to know, Patrick writes in, we solicited all kinds of questions from our viewers. Patrick writes in and says, when is it time to bail on your house? To let it go into foreclosure, turn over the keys, and walk away?
Well, it's a complicated question to know when to bail on a house, or sometimes people ask me a similar question, when to file bankruptcy, you know, when to bail on the whole situation. And you've really got to look at the individual situation. Most of the time, though, people tend to give up emotionally long before the mathematics have given up. You just get beat down and you get beat up. But, you know, if there is literally no way out of the situation and you can't pay the payments, then guess what? You can't pay the payments. It's not that I won't pay the payments. It's not that it's inconvenient to pay the payments. It's I literally cannot pay the payments. And we're talking to a lot of families whose house payment nowadays is 50, 60% of their take-home pay. That's not going to work. You're going to struggle. You're going to fall down with that.
Some people have said that they know they're in trouble because a member of the family, the spouse, has lost a job, can't get another job. They know they're not going to be able to make that mortgage payment. They go to the mortgage company, but the mortgage company says, the bank, you've got to miss payments first. Is there any preemptive strike that somebody can do when they know they're going to be in hot water and they're not going to be able to fulfill that mortgage commitment before it gets way out of hand? What should they be doing?
Well, if you're going to look at the mortgage and say there's no way I'm going to be able to, you know, replace that job to be able to stay in this house, then let's just go ahead and say that out loud, and that's called a for sale sign in the front yard. Let's not wait until we're 6 months behind and then try to expect the mortgage company to write down a mortgage or suddenly change the terms to 80 years from 30 years or something to make your deal work. Basically, because of a job loss, you're now in a house you can't afford. If you don't think you're going to replace that job in a reasonable period of time, a for sale sign's in order in the front yard. That's a harsh thing. That's a bad reality. But it's a whole lot better than sitting there and being in denial and waiting on this thing to catch up with you and hit you in the back of the head.
Tell me what recommendation you have today for people who are without work. I know you've said when they've been in debt, get a second job. Eat through that debt as quickly as you can. If they don't have the ability to get a second job because they don't even have a first job, and people are waiting sometimes 1-2 years or more to replace that job. They're trying, they're pounding the pavement, they can't find it. What recommendation would you have for them? How should their life change? What should they be doing?
Well, there's two sides to the financial equation. There's the income side and the outgo side. If the career has completely unraveled and you're sitting here looking at a 6-month or a 1-year window to get a job, it's time to move. It's time to go to another place where they are hiring. And it's time to go to a situation where you can land a job. You can't just sit and have no income for a year or 2 years. That formula is not going to work. You've got to make a geographic relocation in that kind of a situation. Now, I don't believe that, by the way. I don't think that the Michigan economy has completely imploded to where there are no jobs and it's 2 years before you go get a job. Somebody's being a little picky here. Somebody's not being willing to change the horses that they're riding. They're trying to stay in their same little narrow niche. You may have to reinvent yourself. You may need to go take a class. You may need to go start a small business. But there are people in Michigan still working.
What do you think and say about families who are really struggling moving back in together with each other? You know how the extended family in the old days, the ethnic families and so on, they would live together. Do you see that as a possibility for survival, a necessity? And are you seeing more of that at all as you travel the country?
I'm not seeing families move in together due to economic necessity. Very, very seldom. Now, sometimes, the 28-year-old kid is broke and he moves back in the basement for a period of time. There's a little bit of that going on, but there always has been a little bit of that going on in our culture. And so, no, I'm not really seeing a shift in that at all. Instead, again, that implies that your situation is permanent, that we're never going to prosper, that we're never going to have an income, that we're never going to find a career track that works. And I just don't buy into that. I really honestly don't. When you've got 9% or 10% unemployment, by definition what that means is you have 90% employment. That means 9 out of 10 people are working. And we've got to keep that in mind. This spin that is just constantly going out there that is negative, yes, hey, I'm very well aware there's some folks hurting. We work with them every day. But the way it is put out there right now is as if the whole world is coming to an end. And it's 10% unemployment. Now, really, I grew up in the 70s. We had 10 and 12% unemployment with 10 and 12% inflation. I remember those days. We survived that. And so this idea that somehow the whole culture has to reform and everybody's going to move in everybody's basement and you're going to go 2 years without a job, I'm not buying.
Here's 7 tips to financial peace. Rattle them off. What's the most important in your opinion?
Well, the baby steps that we walk people through are baby step 1's $1,000 cash in the bank. Get started.
Is it doable with people who are underemployed, who maybe are working, but maybe their hours have been chopped down to 30 hours a week instead of 40? Is it doable still?
The total money makeover is doable, but part of the program is income. You've got to create an income. You can't do anything financially without an income. There's always two sides of the equation. Yes, you can chop the outgo, but you've got to create an income. And so your first goal is take care of your own household. Your first goal is eat. Keep the lights on. Keep the house payment paid. Keep the car payment, God forbid if you got one, paid till you get it sold. Those kinds of things. So take care of basic necessities first. Then, when you're doing that and you're creating enough income to squeeze any other money out of the budget, then and only then do you start the 7 steps of the total money makeover. And I would start with $1,000 cash.
All right, give us your second step.
The second one is I'm going to begin to get out of debt. We're going to list our debts smallest to largest, pay everything else, pay minimum payments on everything except the house, and attack the smallest debt. Pay your minimum payment on the house too, but the house is not on this list. Attack the smallest debt. When it's gone, then work your way through those debts until all of your debts are gone. But obviously, to be able to pay extra on your debts, you're creating income, or you've got an income to do that with. So it presupposes that there's a career that's working here.
What do you tell people to pay off that debt? What do you tell them to sacrifice, to give up?
I'm willing to give up almost anything that's within reason. We're going to take care of the household, again, food, shelter, clothing, transportation, and utilities. Past that, it's beans and rice, rice and beans. Amputate the Tahoe. Get rid of the snowmobile. Have a garage sale. Put 2 of the kids on eBay. Well, let's get this thing moving, man. Because life's too short to be sitting there with a bunch of payments. The families in Michigan right now, I've been coming up here for 10 years plus now. The families in Michigan that have been following the stuff that I taught them 10 years ago are just fine right now. They have no debt. They have an emergency fund in place, and their house is paid off or almost paid off. And if they're sitting in the middle of a mess right now with that, then they're in a just fine. They're going to be just fine. So there's a process here. I'm willing to sacrifice to get to a place where I truly do have financial peace. 2 words that don't go together, like airline service.
Tell us your next step.
Once you're done with your baby step 2, which is you're out of debt, everything but the house, then we're going to go back to that $1,000 account, raise it up to a fully funded emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of expenses.
Is that still good enough, 3 to 6 months?
Well, I'm going to be on the 6-month side if my career is unstable. And by the way, if you know there's a layoff out there, you really, not just you're worrying because you watch the news too much, but really there's a bunch of layoffs, you're in an industry that's spiraling downward, then you don't do the total money makeover right now. You don't do the get out of debt thing. We're just going to pile up cash and get ready. We need a war chest. But if everything's stable, we're working this through, then yeah, I'm going to go with that 3 to 6 months. And the more stable your situation is, the more you would be towards that 3-month side. The less stable it is, the more towards the 6-month side. If you're self-employed like me, I'm always going to be over on that 6-month side because that's always an unstable world. If you're straight commission, I'm going to be over on that 6-month side. If you got a job that's a teacher in a post office, well, you're probably pretty stable. These are 2 government jobs, and you could, cheat back to that 3-month side. Now, once you've done that, then we start retirement in baby step 4. 5 is kids' college. 6 is pay off the house as quick as you can. And 7 is just get really wealthy and give a bunch of it away.
Here's what people are asking, a lot of our viewers. They want to know, should they pay off their debt or should they invest with whatever money they have? Where is the priority now? Should they continue to invest for retirement 401ks, put it somewhere else, or should they pay all debt off first?
We recommend becoming debt-free but the house before you start a 401k. And if you're in a 401k or a Roth, I'd recommend temporarily stopping. I wouldn't cash it out, but I'd temporarily stop adding to it. Use all of that cash flow to attack your debt. Once you get out of debt as fast as you possibly can, because if you've got no payments but a house payment, puts you in a completely different situation in the world we live in today.
Okay. One of our viewers, Mike, wants to know your reaction to our government living with huge debt and racking up a lot more credit right now with all of these bailout plans.
Well, I think the bailout plan and the stimulus plans are just spending plans. I don't think they're going to stimulate anything. We threw $700,000 million last year at the thing, and it was like pouring a 5-gallon bucket of water in the sand. It was just gone. And I'm afraid that's what this one's going to do too. So I think it's a huge mistake for the government to nationalize everything. And I think it's a huge mistake for individuals that are watching you and I right now to wait on the government to fix their lives, because they're going to have a long wait. The government is not very efficient. They're very slow at best. At worst, they're incompetent. And so don't sit around and wait on the Democrats or the Republicans to fix your life. If you wait on anybody else to fix your life, you're going to have a long wait.
Dave Ramsey, the last question comes from Emily. She wants to know, is it time for soup and a gun, as you refer to in your Financial Peace University?
Soup and a gun.
Soup and a gun. Do you remember that?
Oh, I guess.
Where
yeah.
the economy's totally collapsing, big companies are shutting down.
Yeah. The economy is not totally collapsing, and big companies, all of them, are not shutting down. There's a few of them have been run very, very poorly for years, and they're paying a price for that, whether they be in Wall Street or whether they be in Detroit, or whether they be right here in Grand Rapids or my hometown of Nashville. Companies that have been living right on the edge with no margin and have been run poorly are paying a price for that, just like individuals do. But this economy is not over. It's far from over. I was with Chick-fil-A this week, as a matter of fact. Their sales are up 12% this year. Go figure, 12% increase. Their people are prospering all through that organization. There are organizations all across America that are doing very well and have chosen, by the way they've run themselves, to not participate in a recession. And that's very, very possible for individuals to do as well. No, it's not time to go live in the cellar and load your Uzi and be paranoid. We're far from that. I know things seem a little bleak, but we're going to be okay.
What do you project, if I can ask you, what do you project between now and the end of this year, next year, for the economy?
Those who live by the crystal ball eat glass. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I really don't know. I will tell you, I think real estate is going to turn around in most markets probably by the end of the year. I think we're going to see a huge turnaround in residential real estate. I think it's going to be longer than that for Michigan. I think Michigan's got some structural problems to her economy. You guys are taxed unbelievably heavily, and this cancer that is in Detroit is a problem, and it's going to take a while for that, and it spreads all the way up here to Grand Rapids. It really has, and we see it with some of the manufacturing concerns around this particular area. But stuff like the great manufacturing that's right here, a lot of it is based in business orientation. Steelcase and Herman Miller and quality products produced by good people. I've been coming up here a long time, and those things will come right back as soon as the business world turns around a little bit. It may be next spring before we see some of that. But Michigan in general is going to come back a little slower than the rest of the nation, but she's going to be okay too. There's good people up here in Grand Rapids.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.